Thank you for watching Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Budnam. Following are the news which have been reported by American, Canadian, European, Asian, African channels and also reported by news agencies, writers, AFP, AP. I am thankful to all news resources. Now the headlines. Relation between inflation and the Federal Reserve interest rates in America. EPA put tough condition for drinking water cleaning in America. Russia is persecuting Christians in Russian-occupied Ukraine. Mr. Biden said Israel has agreed to certain things in Gaza. Israel and Iran threaten each other verbally. European Union has changed migration laws. Floodwaters are rising in Russian region of Dagestan. Storms and tornadoes in southern U.S. Policemen sentenced in Mississippi. Trump criticized Arizona Supreme Court. Trump CFO sent to jail. Wall Street down. Dow Jones still down. Nasdaq down. S&P 500 down. Now the news in detail.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In an historic ruling, Arizona's conservative Supreme Court has reinstated an 1864 law barring almost all abortions in the state. In its ruling, the court wrote, quote, "Physicians are now on notice that all abortions, except those necessary to save a woman's life, are illegal," unquote. The 160-year-old law predates Arizona becoming a state and was passed decades before women could even vote. While the court stayed its decision for 14 days, the ruling sent shockwaves across Arizona and the nation. President Biden slammed the ruling as extreme and dangerous. Arizona's Attorney General Chris May said she will not enforce it, saying, quote, "No woman or doctor will be prosecuted under this draconian law." Arizona's Democratic Governor, Katie Hobbs, vowed to protect abortion rights.
Arizona's 2022 abortion ban is extreme and hurts women. And the near-total Civil War-era ban that continues to hang over our heads only serves to create more chaos for women and doctors in our state. As governor, I promised I would do everything in my power to protect our reproductive freedoms.
Last week, the group Arizona for Abortion Access said it had collected enough signatures, over 500,000, to put a measure on the ballot in November to enshrine abortion rights in Arizona. Reproductive rights will also play a key role in Arizona's closely watched Senate race. Republican candidate Carrie Lake criticized the court's ruling Tuesday, even though just 2 years ago she called it a, quote, "great law." The Arizona ruling came just a day after Republican presidential frontrunner Donald Trump said abortion should be decided by the states. We'll have more on Arizona after headlines. President Biden's leveled some of his harshest criticism of Israel yet as the death toll in Gaza tops 33,300. In an interview with Univision, Biden directly criticized Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel's killing of 7 aid workers from World Central Kitchen last week.
I think what he's doing is a mistake. I don't agree with his proposal. I think it's outrageous that those three vehicles were hit by drones and taken out on a highway where it wasn't like it was along the shore. It wasn't like there was a convoy moving there, etc. So what I'm calling for is for the Israelis to just call for ceasefire, allow for the next 6-8 weeks total access to all food and medicine going into the country.
Biden's comments were made a week ago, but only aired on Univision on Tuesday. Palestinians in Gaza are making the end of Ramadan as Israel continues its assault. Officials in Gaza say at least 14 Palestinians, including 4 children, have died in Israeli strikes on the Nusrat refugee camp. On Monday, Israel assassinated the mayor of the Al-Maghazi refugee camp. Hamas accused Israel of committing a war crime.
The Israeli Occupations Army committed a crime yesterday with the assassination of Al-Maghazi municipal chief Hatem Salah al-Ghamri. He's known as a civilian, a municipal head, who provides municipal services since the first day of this war, this genocide against civilians in civil sectors. The Israeli Occupations Army purposefully targeted al-Ghamri, even though they're fully aware that he's a civil servant and only works within that framework at Al-Maghazi refugee camp.
On Capitol Hill, about 50 protesters were arrested Tuesday when they blocked access to the Senate cafeteria, calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Protesters also disrupted Lloyd Austin during a Senate hearing, where the defense secretary was questioned by Republican Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas.
I want to address what the protesters raised earlier. Is Israel committing genocide in Gaza?
Senator Cotton, we don't have any evidence of genocide being created.
So that's a no. Israel's not committing genocide in Gaza.
We don't have evidence of that.
Thank you.
That was Lloyd Austin speaking with Arkansas's Republican Senator Tom Cotton. Turkey has announced it will restrict exports to Israel until Israel declares a ceasefire in Gaza and allows in more aid. Israel blasted Turkey's decision, accusing it of blackmail. The first criminal trial of a former U.S. president appears set to begin Monday after Donald Trump lost his 10th attempt to delay the trial. But Trump's appeal could still be heard by a full panel of 5 appellate court judges. Trump's accused of falsifying business records to hide hush money payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels before the 2016 election. In 2018, Trump's lawyer Michael Cohen pleaded guilty to making the payments for Trump and spent over a year in prison. The state of Missouri executed Brian Dorsey Tuesday despite a rare call by 70 prison guards and a former warden for his life to be spared. Dorsey was convicted in 2006 for murdering his cousin and her husband while high on drugs. He later turned himself in and pleaded guilty. Prison guards at the Potosi Correctional Center recently wrote to Missouri Governor Mike Parson urging him to commute Dorsey's death sentence. They cited his unblemished record in prison, during which time he became a popular barber who cut the hair of both prisoners and staff. The guards wrote, quote, "He doesn't deserve to be executed. We know that he was convicted of murder, but that is not the Brian Dorsey that we know," unquote. In Michigan, the parents of Ethan Crumbley, who shot dead 4 classmates at Oxford High School in 2021, have been sentenced to between 10 and 15 years in prison. James and Jennifer Crumbley are the first parents to be held criminally responsible for a mass school shooting committed by their child. During the sentencing hearing, Nicole Beausoleil, the mother of Madison Baldwin, who died in the school shooting, addressed the Crumbleys.
You say you wouldn't do anything different. Well, that really says on what type of parents you are, because there's a lot of things I would do different. But the one thing I would have wanted to be different was to take that bullet that day, so she could continue to live the life she deserved.
New York City's reached a $28 million settlement in a lawsuit brought forward by the family of a former Rikers prisoner who suffered severe brain damage after attempting to hang himself in his cell while guards watched without intervening. Nicholas Feliciano was 18 years old at the time and had a history of severe mental illness and previous suicide attempts. He was imprisoned at Rikers over a parole violation in late 2019 when he tried to hang himself while more than half a dozen guards stood by. They did not interfere until Feliciano became unconscious and limp. 3 of the guards and a captain were charged with felonies in 2022. If approved, the settlement will be among the largest pretrial settlements ever awarded to a single plaintiff in a civil rights case in New York City. In Chicago, the family of Dexter Reed is calling for charges against the police officers who shot and killed Reed after a traffic stop last month. Newly released body cam video shows plainclothes Chicago police officers fired nearly 100 shots in just 41 seconds. It remains unclear why officers assigned to a tactical unit pulled over Reed, who was black, or why they approached his car with guns drawn. Police initially said Reed was pulled over because he wasn't wearing a seatbelt, but Reed was driving in a car with tinted windows. Police claim the shootout began after Reed fired the first shot. And the railroad giant Norfolk Southern has agreed to pay $600 million to settle a class action lawsuit over last year's train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. The disaster led to a massive explosion in the release of toxic chemicals, including levels of dioxin hundreds of times higher than what's considered safe. Many local residents say they fear the settlement will not come close to covering future healthcare expenses. East Palestine resident Chrissy Ferguson criticized the settlement, saying, quote, "I just feel like we've been victimized over and over and over again." And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now! Co-host Juan Gonzalez in Chicago. Hi, Juan.
Starting you are supporting genocide. China funding this. You people are funded by China. Funded by what
Well, there are crows flying around. This harpies, wow. That's more from the Save Humanity crowd today, accosting Josh Hawley, who's, by the way, one of the least pro-war senators on Capitol Hill. Now, you may have noticed that the palms of their hands were painted or dipped in what looks like red ink or red paint or something. Now, why is that? Well, they didn't reveal their thinking as to why, but we do know that back in 2000, 2 IDF soldiers who made a wrong turn in the West Bank and then were intercepted by a bloodthirsty mob that went on to torture these IDF soldiers and then murder them at a police station. One of the gunmen even spoke to one of the soldiers' wives on the phone, reportedly telling her, "We're slaughtering your husband now." And apparently the mob loved it. And one of the soldiers, Aziz Salah, noticed he was covered in the blood of the soldiers. He had strangled and stabbed them. But he knew what the crowd wanted. He walked over to a window and held up his bloody hands. They cheered. Then the bodies of those soldiers were thrown out of the police station and desecrated. So perhaps the next time you see one of those pro-Hamas edgy protesters holding up their red hands and wailing about how they're for peace and human rights, you might remember this image and the story. Joining me now, Missouri Senator Josh Hawley. Senator, they, for the most part, are following around the Biden campaign, and I believe there'll be a pretty big presence at the Democratic National Convention this summer. What's their beef with you here?
Well, their beef with me is that I'm pro-Israel. I mean, that's the long and the short of it, Lord. I have to tell you, I really enjoyed the exchange because when you point out to them that they are funded by China, Code Pink are paid for protesters funded by the Chinese Communist Party. Their money comes from China. It's laundered through a bunch of dark money groups, and then it goes to Code Pink. These are people who can't even admit that the Uyghurs are in internment camps, concentration camps, and yet they say that Israel is a terrorist state. Give me a break. These guys, it is AstroTurf wackos is what these guys are, and it's time they got called out.
Well, while the radicals are angry at people who are pro-Israel, the billionaires are very happy, Senator, with the Biden campaign. The Biden Victory Fund received more than 240 six-figure donations back in 2023. And according to Forbes, 25% of the country's billionaires donated to Biden in 2020, compared to only 14% for Trump. So my question to you is, although Trump has some billionaires no doubt supporting him, he had a big money haul last weekend, what is it that the globalist billionaires are getting from Biden that they're worried about not getting from Trump?
Well, the globalist billionaires are investing in making China rich and America poor. I mean, they're betting on the demise of the United States. These are the same people who have happily sent our jobs first to Mexico, then to China, the same people who have moved industry overseas, the same people who love the Biden climate agenda, where now we're going to pay the Chinese to make electric vehicles that no American wants and sell them back to us at a markup while we decimate American auto jobs in the auto industry. It's all the same people. I mean, these billionaires, Wall Street, they love it. They make money off of it. It's making money off of the demise of America. So they love the Biden policy. The problem is it is destroying this country. It is bankrupting this country, and it is destroying the working class of this country. They know Donald Trump will stop it, and that's why they oppose him.
Despite what we know is this effort to repair relations with China and placate the Chinese in any way that they can, the FBI director had a chilling warning yesterday.
Front and center is China, the defining threat of our generation. If you took every single one of the FBI's cyber agents and intelligence analysts and focused them exclusively on China, China's hackers would still outnumber FBI cyber personnel by at least 50 to 1.
Yeah, Senator, we send Janet Yellen over there to yap or flap with President Xi. And again, all these businessmen, U.S. CEOs go over there and have dinner with him and suck up to him. And this is what actually our FBI director is saying. This is bad news.
Oh, it's terrible news, but Chris Wray, what is he doing with his time? I mean, if China's the number one threat, why is he focused on sending FBI agents to the doors of pro-life Catholic protesters, who just want to march for their faith and demonstrate peacefully, and he's got SWAT teams showing up at their doors in the morning to terrorize them? I mean, come on. Let's put our priorities where they ought to be. If China's the number one threat, let's start acting like it. I tell you, the other thing we could do, Laura, is why are we sending hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine if China is our number one global threat? I mean, these people need to get on the same page here. I mean, let's admit it. If China's the top threat, let's start acting like it. But Chris Wray and the Biden administration, they don't believe it. They're not doing anything to keep America safe. They're out there grinding their political axes and trying to destroy their political opponents.
Senator, I'm glad you survived that Code Pink fiasco. You seem like you're okay. So you didn't wear a pink tie. How's that? All right, Senator, thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it.
Tonight, we're tracking flooding and tornado threats. Millions of Americans under severe weather alerts from Texas to Georgia.
Big tornado!
Multiple tornadoes reported as damaging wind leaves thousands without power.
Water slamming against the windows, debris flying everywhere.
The CBS Evening News starts now.
Oh!
Good evening, I'm Nora O'Donnell, and thank you for being with us. We are coming on the air tonight with more than 25 million Americans in the path of severe and dangerous storms across the South and the Ohio River Valley. Thunderstorms, torrential rains, life-threatening flooding, and tornadoes are impacting states across the Gulf Coast. An EF2 tornado hit the city of Port Arthur, Texas, destroying homes and a church. There is catastrophic damage in Louisiana after a suspected tornado ripped the roof off an apartment building outside New Orleans. And in Mississippi, dozens of homes were hit, and one person was killed when storms slammed the Magnolia State. Tonight, tornado watches are in effect across the region. CBS's Mark Strassman will start us off tonight from a New Orleans suburb that took a direct hit.
Wow!
As many as 3 tornadoes may have touched down in and around Slidell, Louisiana.
Oh!
Wind gusts of up to 110 miles per hour tore through the city, just north of New Orleans.
It came through fast and did a lot of damage, and it left fast.
About 50 people needed rescuing after winds sheared the roof off an apartment building.
It happened really fast. While we were trying to pack a few things, my ceiling caved in, his ceilings caved in.
The damage is unbelievable. Officials in St. Tammany Parish reported the impact was catastrophic and extensive, with more than 100 buildings damaged.
The storm was no joke. It's something that we haven't seen here in Slidell in a very long time.
Flash flooding in New Orleans swelled roads, overwhelming drivers, and marooning vehicles. As the storm moved east, this was the scene on I-10 in Mobile, Alabama. Water everywhere, flooding highways and causeways. It's the same storm system that lit up the sky overnight and brought heavy rain and hail to East Texas. In Port Arthur, a tornado flattened this church, and another shredded this strip mall outside Houston. More than a foot of rain fell in some parts of the state, and in Dallas, a month's worth of rain fell in just 3 hours. One death from the storm has been reported in Mississippi outside Jackson, where the storm churned a swath of downed trees and power lines.
I'm standing in front of a ruined building. It's a general contracting business, and the owner told us earlier this was his life's work. And now, Nora, it's gone in seconds.
Mark, thank you. And these storms are far from over as they move east overnight. Let's bring in meteorologist Mike Bettis from our partners at the Weather Channel. Good evening, Mike.
And Nora, good evening. Some of the violent weather we saw play out today, and especially in places like Louisiana, is going to hit again tomorrow, just areas farther to the east. We've overlaid the high-resolution future radar on top of the areas that will be the biggest targets, including the Panhandle of Florida, up into Georgia. Really heavy storms for you in places like Atlanta, all the way down toward Tallahassee. Some of these storms could affect early tea times for the Masters tomorrow. They could get rained out. Likely flooding across the Gulf Coast here, but could extend all the way up toward the Ohio Valley. Areas from Tampa, I-4 into Orlando, Jacksonville to Savannah, all areas where severe storms could hit. That may include tornadoes as well. There'll be a second area up across the Ohio Valley that could be a target. Cincinnati, Columbus, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and Charleston. In these areas, Nora, watching for high winds and hail to hit.
We'll be watching Mike Bettis. Thank you. Tonight, some Republicans across the country are rhetorically trying to distance themselves from Arizona's Supreme Court ruling that upholds a near total abortion ban. But late today, Republican state lawmakers in Arizona blocked efforts by Democrats to overturn that Civil War-era law. CBS's Nancy Cordes has more on the political uproar.
Angry, let down, frustrated.
Anxiety in Arizona tonight after the state Supreme Court upheld an 1864 law that bans nearly all abortions and criminalizes those who perform the procedure.
It's really upsetting that our politicians who are supposed to represent us are doing this.
Democrats protested on the floor of the state legislature today, and with swing state Arizona up for grabs in November, some Republicans are slamming the ruling too, including former President Donald Trump, who just 2 days ago said abortion should be left to the states. Today, he said Arizona went too far.
And I'm sure that the governor and everybody else are going to bring it back into reason, and that will be taken care of.
President Biden, who has vowed to restore Roe v. Wade, was asked today what his message is to Arizonans.
Elect me. I'm in the 20th century, 21st century.
The controversial law could go into effect in Arizona this summer, forcing patients to travel to neighboring states with less restrictive laws. At the Camelback Family Planning Clinic in Phoenix, phones were ringing off the hook today. Calls from women concerned about abortion access.
As long as we can practice medicine here, we will continue to provide services, whether that means that people need ultrasounds to see how far along they are to see if they do need to go to a different state.
Arizona's highest court warned yesterday that doctors who perform the procedure could face between 2 to 5 years in prison, though the state's Democratic Attorney General says she won't prosecute them.
You are now having physicians who are scared to do their job that they did without batting an eye before in a row.
The uproar in Arizona is reigniting this issue at a national level, with Trump insisting today that if elected, he would not sign a federal abortion ban if Congress sent one to his desk. But Democrats cast major doubt on that claim, noting that he has repeatedly endorsed a ban at 20 weeks in the past.
Nancy Cordes, thank you very much. A large celebration marking the end of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan ended in a volley of at least 30 gunshots today in Philadelphia. Police say 3 people were shot. The city's police chief says it appears to have been a gunfight between 4 or 5 people who are now in custody. Federal officials are assisting in the investigation. Tonight, the family of a 15-year-old boy is demanding an Akron, Ohio police officer be fired after the release of disturbing body cam video. It shows the shooting of the teen, who the family says was holding a toy gun. CBS's Elaine Quijano reports the city's mayor is vowing a thorough investigation.
There is a guy walking down Newton Street, and he was aiming a gun at people's houses.
The call to Akron police came just after 7 p.m. on April 1st. Minutes later, Officer Ryan Westlake arrived.
Catch your hands real quick. Hey, it's fake! Shots fired! Shots fired! It's fake!
Westlake shot 15-year-old Tavion Kuntz-Williams once in the wrist. Police say he was holding this, a replica of an assault weapon. Federal law requires such replicas to have distinguishing markings, like a permanently attached bright orange plug in the barrel.
I'm a good kid, bro. I get A's in school.
He was doing everything that he absolutely could to comply with police officers' orders.
Attorney Imokai Okolo represents the family.
How is Tavion doing?
It's tough. It's very traumatic. He's been having nightmares, not being able to sleep.
Officer Westlake has been placed on paid administrative leave. He's been on the force 9 years and has been disciplined more than once. In 2021, he was fired, reinstated, and then suspended for several incidents, including pointing a gun at his then-girlfriend while drunk. In this case, former NYPD Detective Sergeant Pete Taylor says the officer only had seconds to act.
I believe that the officer thought that this was a very dangerous situation. Based on the 911 call, he was probably focused on trying to stop this individual from actually hurting someone.
We tried contacting Officer Westlake for comment, but were unable to reach him. In a statement, the local police union stood by Westlake, saying in part, quote, the officer acted within policy and procedure and according to his training. Nora?
Elaine Quijano, thank you. A major setback today for hostage negotiations. An Israeli official tells CBS News Hamas is unable to locate 40 Israeli hostages for a possible ceasefire deal. That's all raising fears tonight for families that their loved ones have died. CBS' Deborah Patter reports tonight on the war that just entered its 7th month.
Palestinians pray amidst the rubble and ruin of Gaza, marking the end of Ramadan with the Muslim holiday of Eid al-Fitr. For many, the day was spent in mourning at the gravesites of loved ones killed in over half a year of war. It's enough, God, Anam Abdesobd, enough with war. Instead of a joyful occasion filled with children's laughter, for this grandmother, it was a day of heartbreak, as she said a final farewell to her grandchildren while their father cradles the body of his youngest son. His wife and 3 children were killed in central Gaza. And for Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh, the conflict became personal. This is the moment he received the news that his 3 adult sons and 4 grandchildren were killed in an Israeli airstrike. As the war drags on and the humanitarian crisis worsens, the wider the rift grows between the US and Israel, with President Biden yesterday sharply criticizing the way Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was conducting this war.
I think what he's doing is a mistake.
And today, reiterating that he expected Netanyahu to make good on his promise to flood Gaza with aid.
And the fact is that we're getting in somewhere in the last 3 days over 100 trucks. It's not enough.
The rift between the US and Israel comes at a precarious time. Tonight we are learning that the commander of US forces in the Middle East is heading to Israel amid increasing concerns that Iran is preparing to launch a major attack against Israel in retaliation for last week's bombing of the Iranian consulate in Damascus. Nora?
We're on high alert. Deborah Patta, thank you. Back here at home, the former chief financial officer of Donald Trump's real estate empire was sentenced to 5 months behind bars today for lying under oath during Trump's civil fraud trial in New York. Alan Weisselberg pleaded guilty to perjury last month, admitting that he lied when he testified that he didn't know how Trump's Manhattan penthouse was valued at 3 times its actual size. Weisselberg previously served 100 days in jail for dodging taxes. Now to some breaking news. Wall Street took a hit, with all 3 major indexes finishing the day in the red. The Dow fell more than 400 points after the Labor Department reported a higher than expected spike in inflation. The consumer price index for March rose at an annual rate of 3.5%, and that is the biggest jump in 6 months. In tonight's Money Watch, CBS's Jolene Kent shows us how consumers are feeling the pinch.
For the 3rd straight month, prices have gone up more than expected, from the rising cost of car insurance and repairs to how much you're paying at the grocery store every week.
Do you know how much one of these costs? $2 freaking dollars.
This was $200.
We supposed to skip the power bill this month so we can buy groceries or the mortgage.
Before the pandemic, all of these groceries, about 30 items, cost $100 on average. Now, 5 years later, according to Nielsen IQ, all this costs 33% more, meaning you'd have to skip about 10 items, like chicken, bread, milk, and bananas to make your $100 budget.
5 years ago versus today, the difference is remarkable. Is that normal?
Oh goodness, it's not normal at all. So that's why consumers are really scrutinizing their behaviors because, prices are leveling off, but they're leveling off at these record high levels.
Higher gas prices and rent also helped push inflation up 3.5% over the last year. Also more expensive, baby food and formula spiking nearly 10%, elder care up over 14%, and veterinary care jumping almost 10%. President Biden responding today.
We're in a better situation than we were when we took office, where inflation was skyrocketing, and we have a plan to deal with it.
But until then, shoppers continue to cut corners where they can.
We asked Americans, have you changed your behavior? And 87% of Americans have said yes to that. We may be seeing more, white meat on the barbecue than red meat this summer because beef prices have gone up 9%. Everybody's been impacted by this. There's no way you can get around it.
The good news here is wage growth last month did outpace inflation, but this March inflation number is the biggest annual jump in 6 months, and it really makes it very unlikely that the Federal Reserve will lower interest rates anytime soon. Nora?
Yeah, many people waiting on that. Jolene Kent, thank you so much. There's breaking news from Dallas. A Super Bowl champion is wanted by police in connection with a terrifying crash. We've got the details next.
Tonight, Dallas police have issued an arrest warrant for Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver Rashee Rice and another driver who are accused of speeding on an expressway and causing a chain reaction crash 2 weekends ago. Rice, who was driving a Lamborghini, is wanted on charges including aggravated assault and collision involving serious bodily injury. Bird flu has been detected in America's largest city, with a small number of birds in New York City parks and green spaces testing positive. A human infection from the outbreak was reported earlier this month in Texas, where a worker at a dairy farm had symptoms similar to pink eye. The CDC says there's no sign of bird flu spreading between people. The cost of a stamp may be going up again. The U.S. Postal Service wants to raise the price of a first-class Forever stamp from 68 cents to 73 cents. If approved, the change would happen in July. The Biden administration is cracking down on so-called forever chemicals in America's drinking water. We've got the details next. Today, the Biden administration laid out the first national standards limiting what are known as forever chemicals in drinking water. As CBS's Ben Tracy reports, the move is aimed at preventing thousands of deaths and tens of thousands of serious illnesses.
Everyone should be able to turn on their tap and trust that the water that they're drinking and giving their children is safe.
EPA Administrator Michael Regan announced a new drinking water standard in North Carolina, where in 2017 it was discovered a chemical plant had been contaminating the local water supply by dumping PFAS into a nearby river.
It was gut-wrenching to when we first learned about our contamination crisis.
Emily Donovan lives near the river and has been fighting for PFAS regulations for years.
How concerned have you been about the water you and your children have been drinking all these years?
I mean, I've been terrified. No mother wants to be told that she contaminated her children.
An estimated 200 million Americans are exposed to PFAS chemicals through drinking water. These forever chemicals last for thousands of years and are used in everything from food packaging to water-resistant clothing and cosmetics. They've been linked to certain cancers, liver damage, and developmental issues in children.
You can't smell these chemicals, you can't taste them, you can't see them, so that's why these new rules are so important.
Now, water utilities must reduce PFAS levels to near zero in the next 5 years. The EPA says 6 to 10% of the 66,000 public drinking water systems will likely need to make changes to comply. That could cost billions of dollars. The American Water Works Association, which represents the utilities, says polluters, not communities, should be held responsible. But for Emily Donovan,
This, I think, is a monumental change in how we look at public water in America.
what matters is making the water safe to drink. Ben Tracy, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Heart of America is next with one of the nation's highest civilian honors for Rosie the Riveter, the women of World War II. Finally, tonight's Heart of America with a long overdue honor for the millions of women who answered the call during World War II. Here's CBS's Nicole Killian.
In trademark red and white polka dots, Rosie the Riveter. More than 24 women representing Rosie the Riveter received recognition with a Congressional Gold Medal for working on the home front in shipyards and factories during World War II.
Remember these 4 little words. We can do it.
Accepting on behalf of the Mosley Centenarian Group, 98-year-old May Cryer, an original Rosie who produced B-17 and B-29 bombers for Boeing in Seattle.
But a lot of women were treated poorly by the men. They resented having the women in there.
Marion Sousa worked in a shipyard in Richmond, California.
Why is the recognition important?
You want to know that you accomplished something during your life. And I guess this is it. Although I raised 6 kids, and I think that's an accomplishment too.
Susan King was a riveter from Baltimore.
For the few of us still living, any time will do to prove to America that we were important too.
Trailblazing then.
We were doing it to save our country.
And now, Nicole Killian, CBS News, The Capitol.
And we are grateful to those women. Rosie the Riveters, tonight's Heart of America. And that's tonight's CBS Evening News. I'm Nora O'Donnell. Good night.
Like the deadly storms on the move, tornadoes touching down and major flash flooding in the south. The dramatic images, power poles exploding as a massive tornado crosses the highway in Louisiana. Major damage near New Orleans, 50 people rescued at an apartment complex. Across the Gulf Coast, heavy rain and hail, strong winds, downing trees, ripping off roofs. Widespread floods, streets and highways underwater. We're tracking it all. Also this evening, growing fallout after Arizona upheld a 160-year-old abortion ban. Donald Trump saying today Arizona went too far, that it will, quote, be straightened out. But how? Shots fired during an end of Ramadan celebration in Philadelphia. 3 injured, including a 15-year-old whom police say had a gun. What we're learning. After a 6-year-old shot a teacher, why the former assistant principal is now charged with child abuse. The warning from President Biden that Iran may be planning a major attack on Israel. And the deadly new airstrike further raising tensions in Gaza. The forever chemicals in your drinking water linked to illnesses like cancer. The EPA announcing the first ever national limits on them. And the grand reopening, months after terrible tragedy, the bowling alley ready to welcome the community back to the lanes.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening and welcome. Heavy destruction, power outages, flooding, and at least 1 death tonight in the south after violent weather, including tornadoes, ripped through parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas today. All of it accompanied by fierce winds gusting to over 70 miles per hour, leaving a tortured landscape of destroyed homes, trees, and power lines. Dozens of people required rescues. 1 death confirmed in Mississippi. Torrential rains along the eastern extreme edge of Texas, over a foot falling in under 48 hours. New Orleans getting a month's worth of rain in a day. And tomorrow, it is not over. 25 million expected to be in the risk zone for severe weather. Kathy Park is in the storm zone tonight.
Big tornado! Big tornado!
Tonight, severe weather sweeping across the south, with tornadoes in Texas and Louisiana tearing through buildings, trees, and apartments. In this one complex, officials say roughly 50 people were rescued.
If that continues to hold true, that we have 0 major angel fatalities, truly a miracle.
Meanwhile, employees at this construction company in Slidell say they were riding out the storm in their office building as a roof blew off.
And I literally watched a plywood wall touch the floor and come back up and touch the floor again and come back up.
A dangerous combination of heavy rain and strong winds snapped power lines and trees across the state.
It once was our house was surrounded by shade, and now it's very sunny.
And I'm assuming no power at this point.
No power.
Emergency responders rushed to trap residents in West Feliciana Parish, stuck after large tree limbs dropped onto roads.
I came down here earlier, but you couldn't go any further right here because that tree was too big.
Baton Rouge in the bullseye for tornadoes during the morning commute. At times, the storms almost look like hurricanes, with wind gusts reaching more than 70 miles per hour.
You can see outside, it's not looking good for any of us across southeast Louisiana.
13 million people across the Gulf Coast are on high alert for flash floods. Parts of Kirbyville, Texas, still underwater.
So it's not a good day to be out on the road.
Back in Louisiana, the cleanup is just beginning, with the disaster opening old wounds.
I feel like back in New Orleans when Katrina hit. I remember that like it was yesterday.
And Kathy joining us out from Slidell. Is the worst of this weather over?
Well, Lester, as you can see, the weather is clear. The storms have moved on out of here. But another round of severe weather is expected to strike portions of the east come tomorrow. But here in Slidell, this is just an example of the destruction left behind. This used to be a hair salon. All the glass has been blown out. All that's left now is a metal framing. Lester?
All right, Kathy, thank you. Also tonight, the fallout from that Arizona Supreme Court ruling that brought back a 19th century abortion law. Former President Donald Trump weighing in, saying it goes too far, along with some other Republicans. Dana Griffin is in Arizona for us tonight.
Tonight, former President Trump distancing himself from that bombshell Arizona ruling on abortion.
Arizona got people, yeah, they did, and that'll be straightened out. And I'm sure that the governor and everybody else are going to bring it back into reason.
The former president criticizing Arizona's revival of the Civil War era ban, adding he won't sign a national ban. And controversial Republican Arizona Senate candidate Carrie Lake endorsed the 1864 law 2 years ago.
We have a great law in the books. We will be a state where we will not be taking the lives of our unborn anymore.
Now saying she opposes it, adding Arizona voters will make the decision on the ballot come November, when an initiative to protect abortion rights will likely be on the ballot. Many Arizona voters differing on abortion stances, but against the total ban.
I'm a Christian, but I still believe in the women's right to choose.
I'm not for abortion, but I think it's not the place of the state to punish women.
President Biden also addressing the ruling.
What do you say to the people of Arizona right now who are witnessing a law go in place that dates back to the Civil War era?
Elect me. I'm in the 20th century, 21st century, not back then. You weren't even a state.
Kathy Herod leads the Center for Arizona Policy, which opposes abortion rights.
Arizona can be the first in the nation to defeat a radical pro-abortion amendment. It simply goes too far for Arizona voters.
Meanwhile, groups like Arizona Abortion Access are working to protect women's right to choose.
After the decision came down yesterday, we decided that we just need to get out and be in as many places as we can be.
You just signed that and I see tears in your eyes.
Yes. Why?
Because I've been in a situation, and I'm lucky to be alive. And you want to have children, and when you find out you can't, and you're in danger, your health is in danger. And I can't imagine the women that are going to be in situations that can't get the care they need.
And Dana, as we saw, you spoke with Arizona voters today. What were they saying about November?
Yeah, Lester, we spoke to voters on both sides. They are now galvanized, just like what we saw when Roe v. Wade was overturned. One voter tells me she wants the state constitution to reflect not 1864, but 2024. Lester?
Dana Griffin, thank you. We'll turn out to the breaking news out of Philadelphia. Multiple people shot at a celebration marking the end of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. Tonight, 5 people are under arrest, most of them minors. Here's George Solis.
Tonight, gunfire erupting outside a Ramadan event in Philadelphia.
We got active shooting going on at this time.
At least 3 people were shot near a mosque, where police say an estimated 1,000 people were gathered to celebrate Eid, the end of the holy month.
They observed 3 males and a female running, and they stopped those individuals, and we recovered 4 weapons.
An officer firing at a 5th suspect, a 15-year-old male who was armed, according to police.
It was unexpected. Like, people were jumping tables, going up under trucks and stuff. Like, people just shooting for no reason.
Police swarming the scene within minutes, confirming at least 30 shots fired into the crowd. It was supposed to be a celebration.
It was supposed to be a celebration in the Ramadan, you know, and for this to happen, it's just sad. It's just sad.
Baybelle was there with her family, and she heard the gunshots.
Kids were playing and just gunshots just all over the place. We were just grabbing the kids, putting them underneath the tables, putting them under, pickup trucks underneath the cars, just getting them to safety.
Tonight, of the 5 people now in custody, 4 of them minors. Police do not believe this was a targeted shooting and anticipate all shooting victims to survive. Tonight, while this community is shaken, they're relieved there were no fatalities. Lester?
All right, George Solis, thank you. And in Virginia, there's a new twist in a school shooting involving a 6-year-old with a gun. More than a year later, the school's former assistant principal has now been charged with child abuse. Aaron McLaughlin explains why.
Tonight, new allegations about the actions of the assistant principal in the hours before a 6-year-old student shot and seriously injured his teacher last year. On Tuesday, a grand jury indicted former assistant principal Dr. Ebony Parker on 8 counts of felony child neglect. 1 count, according to the grand jury, for each bullet inside of the loaded gun the child brought to Richneck Elementary and used to shoot Abigail Zwerner.
I just will never forget the look on his face that he gave me.
Today, the Commonwealth Attorney's Office released the special grand jury's 31-page report, alleging that Dr. Parker neglected to take any action upon receiving 4 reports of a potentially dangerous threat, including a request from a teacher to search the child after concerns were raised the boy had a gun in his pocket. According to the report, the grand jury found Parker acted in complete disregard for the safety of the children at the school, while also noting that when Zwerner tried to warn Parker about the child's behavior, Parker did not look away from her computer screen. NBC News attempts to reach Dr. Parker and the school for comment were unsuccessful. Zwerner's attorneys tell NBC News she is now seeking $40 million in civil damages.
When you look at what happened that day, it meets the elements of child neglect. It was certainly an appropriate charge to be brought.
And what message does Abby believe this sends to other schools?
Well, hopefully they will take notice that they have to be held accountable for their actions.
Tonight's a warning to school administrators across the country. Aaron McLaughlin, NBC News.
We'll turn now to the economy. Stock markets way down across the board today. The Dow losing more than 400 points after disappointing news about inflation. The government said inflation accelerated to 3.5% in March from a year ago. That was up from a 3.2% increase in prices in February. Now, rising prices, one of several concerns President Biden was pressed on at the White House today. The president also sounding the alarm about a possible retaliatory strike on Israel by Iran. Peter Alexander has late details from the White House.
Tonight, new fears of a possible major escalation of the war in the Middle East, with President Biden warning Iran may be planning to hit targets inside Israel soon.
They're threatening to launch a significant attack on Israel. As I told Prime Minister Netanyahu, our commitment to Israel's security against these threats from Iran and its proxies is ironclad.
Iran eyeing retaliation for strikes last week on a diplomatic building in Syria that killed several Iranian commanders, which it blames on Israel. Iran, a primary backer of both Hamas and Hezbollah. Two U.S. officials tell NBC News any retaliation inside Israel is expected to focus on military and intelligence targets, not civilians, and that the Biden administration is considering options for how to respond. Also tonight, growing tensions over a new Israeli airstrike in Gaza. Israel saying the attack killed 3 adult sons of a top Hamas leader, who they say were Hamas operatives, including a commander. Hamas says the strike also killed 4 of his grandchildren. During today's state visit for Japan's Prime Minister, President Biden demanding Hamas accept the latest ceasefire offer that includes returning the hostages, including Americans held by Hamas.
There's a now up to Hamas. They need to move on the proposal that's been made. We'll get these hostages home where they belong.
Tonight, former hostage Aviva Siegel, whose husband is still being held, tells NBC's Andrea Mitchell it's time for results.
Somebody needs to help. And I'm begging Biden to be strong enough, stronger than Hamas.
The president's policy toward the war has sparked protests. Another challenge for the Biden campaign, the economy, with today's headline that inflation ticked up again, even higher than expected. Housing and gas prices accounting for most of it. Overall, prices up nearly 19% since President Biden took office. Former President Trump tonight.
Biden has totally lost control of inflation. It's back. It's raging back.
President Biden saying he's made tremendous progress.
We have dramatically reduced inflation from 9% down to close to 3%. My opposition talks about 2 things. They just want to cut taxes for the wealthy and raise taxes on other people.
Peter, let me ask you about new signs tonight of former President Trump's grip on House Republicans.
Lesser conservative Republicans just blocked an effort to extend a controversial spying law that intelligence officials say is critical to protecting Americans from terrorists and other foreign threats. It is another blow to the Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson after Mr. Trump urged lawmakers to kill it. Lester.
Peter Alexander at the White House. Thank you. The former chief financial officer of the Trump Organization, Alan Weisselberg, was sentenced to 5 months in jail today. Weisselberg pleaded guilty to 2 counts of perjury over his testimony at former President Trump's civil fraud trial. The charges involved his statements about the valuation of Mr. Trump's apartment. In 60 seconds, the arrest warrant issued for Super Bowl winner Rashee Rice. And there are all kinds of things we use, from non-stick cookware to dental floss, chemicals that get into our water. The government's new rules to reduce the risks and save lives. After this. Just breaking, an arrest warrant issued for Kansas City Chiefs star Rashee Rice and another man in connection with that multi-vehicle crash on a highway in Dallas late last month. Officials say Rice and Theodore Knox were speeding and caused a chain reaction collision. They're charged with aggravated assault and collision involving bodily injury. 4 people were injured in the crash. And a major health alert about those so-called forever chemicals in our drinking water. The Biden administration today announcing the first ever national limits on those chemicals that have been linked to serious illnesses. Ann Thompson is here to tell us more. Ann, good evening.
Good evening, Lester. This is a big deal. The EPA says this means when some 100 million Americans turn on their taps, the water that comes out will be essentially free of those forever chemicals called PFAS. They're linked to a whole host of health problems, including cancer, thyroid disease, and heart disease. The new rules cover 6 of these chemicals. Water companies will have 3 years to monitor the chemical levels, and if they exceed the new standards, 2 years to fix it. These forever chemicals are in many things, like water-resistant clothing, non-stick cookware, firefighting foam, and yes, even some dental floss. Environmentalists call these standards historic, but the water industry says meeting them could drive up your bills. Lester?
All right, man, thank you. Up next for us here tonight, a new kind of blueprint for home design in our series AI Revolution. By now, you've probably seen or heard about some of the things AI can do, producing all kinds of images, videos, and even songs. But what about the floor plans for a new home? CNBC's Diana Olick shows us how it's done and what it could mean for an entire industry.
Houses today are the product of design work done by architects. Oh, I like the second one. But this artificial intelligence program is looking to disrupt the industry. Meet Vitruvius. It's the brainchild of Jason Ballard, CEO of Icon, a robotic construction company that brought the first 3D printed community to Austin, Texas.
The big vision of Vitruvius is to go all the way from human design all the way through delivery, so like construction documents, budget schedules, even robotic constructions.
The program already lets you design a home with detailed floor plans. The future, Ballard says, will include electrical, structural, plumbing, and mechanical in delivered plans, all to make the usually pricey process cheaper and faster.
I'd like a log cabin style vacation ski home.
Vitruvius asks you questions and learns from your answers, incorporating knowledge from every design it's ever seen.
I'd like an open floor plan for family events.
I tried it out with Ballard's help.
It's got the fireplace in your bedroom, as you have asked, and it's a traditional log cabin style, as you have asked.
Text prompts.
This looks expensive. Can you make the home more affordable?
Lead to nearly instant renderings.
The kitchen's smaller, I see.
Everything is smaller, everything's a little more basic.
Architects aren't going to love you very much.
I have no doubt that tools like this are going to change the way that we do things.
Michael Bruckwick has been an architect in the D.C. area for roughly 30 years.
It certainly is a disruptor, and it certainly will arrange and rearrange staffing and productivity and how and who does what.
He said he sees AI taking over some basic areas like restrooms and stairways in offices or hotels, but not everything.
Regulation-wise, one would still need an architect.
Bruckwick says he's also concerned AI will stifle creativity because while it may have ingested millions of designs from the past, AI won't have a real architect's eye for the future. Lester?
Fascinating stuff, Diana. Thank you. Up next, after a mass shooting, the remarkable comeback of a beloved bowling alley as a community heals. Finally, a story about bowling and healing. Nearly 6 months after an unimaginable tragedy at their bowling alley, the owners say they're ready to welcome the community back. Here's Emily Aketa.
Justin Duray grew up bowling here in Lewiston, Maine. So when the owner announced he was closing the business in 2021, he bought it just in time.
We were bowlers, and we knew a lot of people here, and we hated to see it close.
But last October, his passion project was upended when the gunman stormed the bowling alley and a nearby bar, killing 18 people.
What do you remember from that night?
Thinking that Samantha had been murdered.
Samantha feared the same for her husband.
And not knowing if he was alive. I didn't find out for like 2.5 hours if he was alive or not.
Even nearly 6 months later, the emotion's still so raw.
Heartache, guilt, nightmares, and triggers have plagued Samantha and Justin's days and nights.
I didn't think that I'd ever be able to walk in here again, let alone reopen the business.
But slowly, a change of heart and a feeling that Lewiston needed just-in-time recreation.
We have all new paint on the walls.
It's now in the final stages of renovation, days away from reopening.
The people that we lost loved this place. I could hear Bob Violet just telling me, you can't give up.
You feel like this is what the victims would have wanted?
Yes. Absolutely.
Bob and Lucy Violet were killed while volunteering with the Youth League, just as they did every Wednesday night. Son John and his wife Cassandra moved back to Maine to continue that legacy.
I look over at the lanes over here. That's where Youth League Wednesday night practice was. Came in on a lot of Wednesday nights with my own kids myself. So I try to remember the good things.
We've spent a lot of hours in this bowling alley, years and years and years here with them. So I kind of feel close to them by being here.
I hope my presence encourages others, and hopefully we can move forward.
Pressing on the only way they know how. Lewiston strong. Emily Aketa, NBC News, Lewiston, Maine.
And that's Nightly News for this Wednesday. Thank you for watching, everyone. I'm Lester Holt. Please take care of yourself and each other. Good night.
I love you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking.
Thank you for watching and privilege of your time. This is Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Woodman. Have a good life.